Audiobook chapters 1 to 5 of a 21-chapter science fiction adventure novel. By Rita Weston. War God Neit and the Bronze Relic of Rapa Nui. By Rita Weston. Copyright 2026 by Rita Weston. All rights reserved. No part of this book may be used or reproduced in any form whatsoever without written permission except in the case of brief quotations in critical articles or reviews. This book is a work of fiction. Names, characters, businesses, organizations, places, events, and incidents either are the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. Printed in the United Kingdom. For more information, or to book an event, contact anna.monroy@rocketmail.com. https /@author-hubby 280D23C base 44 app home. Book design by Kindlepreneur. Cover design by kenva.com. ISBN, paperback, 9798196810770. First edition, May 2026. Figure 1. Moai statues on the slopes of Reino Raraku, Rapa Nui. Contents. 1. The Observatory Letter. 2. The Hill of Battles. 3. Whispers of Neit. 4. Museum of the Lost Gods. 5. The Shadow of Alma. 6. The Invitation from the Sea. 7. Departure from Shannon. 8. The Island of Giants. 9. The Archaeologist's Map. 10. The Moai Alignment. 11. Stone and Starfire. 12. The War God Across Oceans. 13. Under the Ahu. 14. Dreams of the Red Sky. 15. The Lost Navigator's Journal. 16. Ancestral Fires. 17. The Bronze and the Basalt. 18. Echoes of Alma. 19. Neit's Constellation. 20. The Star War Hypothesis. 21. Departure from Rapa Nui, the Starborn Gods. Figure 2. The Bronze Triskele Medallion, Reese's Relic. Somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known. Dr. Carl Sagan, USA, 1995. Part 1. THECALLFROMTHEPAST. 1. The Observatory Letter. POV, Dr. Rhys Morgan First Person Limited. The fog over Dublin moved like an old army through the city, rank upon rank, silent and inevitable, draping banners of grey over rooftops and quads. On mornings like this the streets felt older than their paving, older even than the names stitched into maps, as if some submerged time pressed upward through the stones and breathed. I crossed Trinity's courtyard with the damp in my scarf and the taste of iron in the chill air. I had slept poorly. Not from any particular worry, though the mead dig might have justified it, but from the kind of restlessness that comes when the land hums with something you can't name. My grandmother used to say that the country keeps counsel with those who listen. Listen to the ground, eyes, she would whisper when I was a boy. The ground remembers. I had laughed then. I don't laugh now. My office key stuck in the lock before it yielded. When the door opened, the warm smell of old paper and linseed polish wrapped around me. The radiator clicked like a patient metronome. I turned the lamp on, and the small circle of light found what my eye did not expect, an envelope on the center of the desk, set square, conspicuous, the way a relic sits when a curator wants you to see it first. The seal stopped my breath. A 5-point star with spiral arms, pressed into midnight wax. Alex's flair, she'd been stamping that little star since we were kids, onto school folders and birthday notes, a private joke between us that hardened into a sign. I brushed the pad of my thumb over the cool wax and felt, absurdly, that it pulsed. I broke the seal. The paper was thick, the fold hastily made. Alex's handwriting, slanted, certain, a little fierce, ran dark across the page, as though the ink had wanted out of the pen. Rhys. The desert sky has changed. There's a pattern in the Alma data, structured, rhythmic, and not noise. It plots as a spiral. Not ornamental, precise. It looks like a Celtic triskele. I know what you're thinking. I need you to see it before I show anyone else. Avoid university channels. Use the secure link only. I'll send the authenticate phrase on a separate circuit. This is not like before. Or maybe it is, and we were too early. I read it twice, then a third time, and found that my mouth had dried to paper. The radiator ticked. Somewhere in the corridor a trolley squeaked, and the building sighed back to its early morning silence. A triskele in a radio wave form. The word impossible drifted across my mind like a gull and kept going. Alex doesn't misread instruments. Even when she's exhausted. Especially then. If she wrote spiral and meant triskele, she meant it. She remembered the price of saying these things out loud. We both did. I set the letter down, carefully, as though it might bruise, and reached for the bronze disc I'd left on blotting paper beside the field notes. Even in the lamplight the piece held its own weather. Bronze from the hill of battles in County Meath, lifted from the margin of a buried palisade, its edge notched by age, its face engraved with 3 spiraling arms that swept inward to a hollow as delicate as a pupil. The volunteers whispered and crossed themselves when it came out of the earth. The foreman muttered, "Neit's coin," and spat into his palm, as if to pay for saying the name. Neit. The old Irish war god. The one the stories never soften. Where Ogma charms and Luff dazzles, Neit stands silent at the field's edge and does not blink. Sometimes he is husband to Nemain and the bad, sometimes only companion to the fever that comes before battle. My grandmother would not keep his name in the kitchen after dark. Say it at a crossroads if you must, she'd say, but never at hearth. I had laughed at that too, once. The disc's lines were cleaner than they had any right to be, their curves calculated rather than guessed. I'd measured them against the drafts of spiral ornament from Noth and Douth and found ratios that made my neck itch, recurrences, proportional echoes, the kind of mathematics that turns decoration into instruction. There are days when you know an object is more than it lets itself be. As I was standing under the lamp, I tipped it over. The spiral seemed to swallow and return the glow, a slow heartbeat under metal skin. Ridiculous thought. But it persisted. I carried the disc to the window. The fog outside pressed its forehead to the glass. Dublin blurred into a map of brightness and damp. When the first thin smear of sunrise came up over the roofs, a new line burned faintly across the bronze, as if the day itself had traced a path I hadn't seen. Neit, I heard myself say, softly, without quite meaning to. There is a way your mouth shapes the name of an old god that feels like stepping onto a battlefield you cannot see. What are you then, sign or door? No answer, of course. Only the radiator's patient tick and the faint grit of fog on glass. I went back to the desk and Saturday. The old chair complained. The letter's edges had begun to curl as if it were absorbing the room's moisture, or the room were absorbing it. I had not yet let myself think of Atacama. The last time, the collapse, the clipped emails, the words speculative, romantic, unprofessional spoken by men who have lived entire lives without once feeling the ground hum under their feet. I had stood with Alex then in a room like this one, with the smell of dust and copy toner and effort, and watched a small, brutal thing pass between us, doubt. Not in her. In me. An invisible betrayal, and the worst kind. This is not like before, she had written. Or maybe it is, and we were too early. Pressing the heel of my hand to my brow, I closed my eyes. The dark behind my lids was not empty. The triskele rose there, uncoiling and coiling again, not as decoration but as a path. The 3 arms did not end, they turned inward as roads do when they bring you to a center you're not sure you want. I opened my eyes and reached for the field notebook. The habit of writing steadies me. I wrote the date and the time and then, without preface, Alma waveform described by A as triskele. Bronze disc recovered Meath, site, HB3, exhibits proportional matches to triskele arm ratios. I paused, listening to the scratch of the pen. Neit invoked on site by workers, disc nicknamed, Neit's coin. The name sat on the page and did not look back at me. The corridor quieted. A gull called, harsh and thin. The city's low noise gathered under the fog and made a damp roof. I thought of the hill of battles, the way the earth there had given grudgingly, the clay gripping the spade like a jaw. On the second day I'd walked the ridge alone at dusk and felt as surely as one feels rain, the press of other footfalls. Not imagination, not romance. Pressure, as of men who had stood there and leaned forward into wind and waiting. When we found the palisade lying and the disk at its shadow, I felt the old household silence rise in me, the one my grandmother kept for stories about Neit. He doesn't favor sides, she would say when I was a boy, tucking in blankets against a January draft. He favors the field. He keeps the ground. And he takes what crosses it. On my desk, the disk kept its shine. I reached again, unable not to. The metal was colder now, my palm took it like a stone takes the river. I set it on its edge and let it roll a short arc over the blotter. It wobbled, settled, and in settling found a groove among my papers that pointed, absurdly, at the letter. I stared at that little alignment and felt the strangest mixture of dread and relief, dread because I am not a man who lives by omens, relief because sometimes the world will be plain if you let it. I pulled the letter closer. There was no authenticate phrase enclosed, no second page. Of course not. Alex would send the code by a path no one would associate with me. I knew what she wanted anyway, my eyes, the old habits, the part of me I pretend is dead when funding bodies are in the room. I turned the disk over. On the reverse, the spiral arms were fainter, as if an apprentice had tried the pattern after the master had finished. Near the rim, almost lost to corrosion, a line of dots walked 3 paces, paused, walked 3 paces, paused. I had counted them the night before and told myself they were random pitting. Now, with Alma's spiral crawling like a tide under my skin, they looked like a measure. Is this you then, Neit? I whispered and heard the old caution in my own voice. Say it at a crossroads if you must. The office was no crossroads, but it would do. I stood and crossed to the low bookcase where the atlases lived. Archaeoastronomy of the Atlantic facade, Irish passage graves, Celts, and the cosmos. I slid out a folder where I keep what I do not show, rubbed drafts of motifs, ratios no one asks for, alignments that collapse under ordinary patience but not under the kind you inherit from people who believed their dead could hear them. I set them side by side with Alex's letter. The lamp's circle took them all into its custody. A knock at the door startled me. Too loud. The disk jolted against the blotter and chimed a small, impatient note. Morning, Dr. Morgan. Maeve, from across the hall, bright scarf, quick mind, always one step away from a laugh. Coffee? We're braving the machine. Later, I said, too quickly. Go on without me. Ah, you and your trench goblins, she teased, and her steps retreated, unoffended. Silence returned, companionable now. I breathed. I let my shoulders drop. The fog leaned on the window as if to listen. I read Alex's words again, slower, letting them settle into the places where they fit. Structured. Rhythmic. She would have checked that, 100 ways, 1,000. Looks like a triskele. Not is, not proves, only looks like. Careful even in alarm. She had learned. Across the room my phone sat face down, mercifully dumb. I did not want its light in this old air. I did not want its chur of the present tense. I wanted the room the way it was, the tick, the fog, the bronze, the letter, and the name that never quite leaves any Irish room where men have measured distance with their bodies, Neit. I thought of the museum in London that had asked for a proposal last month, Irish War, Field and Sky, the curator keen to string iron and story through a dark hall and let school children walk between ghosts. I had written a careful paragraph about martial culture and cosmological orientation, which is a way of saying what we know without admitting what we fear, that the people who made these things were not looking only at one another when they sharpened their blades. They were looking up. The lamp warmed my hands. I lowered my head and let the past rise the way it knows how, vision not of clarity, but of texture. A camp beyond a ridge. A dozen fires under a cloud that does not move. The smell of fat and damp wool. A man with a torque at his throat tying a leather thong through a bronze disc and lifting it to the pale light of a star that trembles even when the air is still. He wears a look I know, a man who will go where the line is and stay there because he cannot do otherwise. Beside him, a woman tears a cloth the way one tears bread and says a word too softly to carry. The man nods. He places the disc flat to his chest as if to calm a heart that will not be calmed. He does not pray to Neit. One does not pray to the ground. One accepts its terms. In an instant, the office came into focus, lamp, paper, and bronze all became clear. The old instinct that makes academics nervous, that soft step toward the edge where myth and instrument might keep each other honest, was awake in me and looking out of my eyes. I reached finally for the phone and turned it over. The screen lit my palm. No message from Alex. Good. There would be a code later, somewhere unexpected. In the meantime, there was work. I opened the laptop and did not connect to the university network. I did the small private things, a local note, a draft schema, a title I will never show a committee, the field spiral, Neit, who, and the triscale hypothesis. My fingers hesitated over a who, that other ocean, that other field of stone faces looking inward and outward at once. It was a thought I'd been circling for months without naming. I backspaced the word and left only Neit. One battlefield at a time. The bronze disc glinted. Tilting the lamp made the arms of the triscale shimmer and reflect the light, evoking the gentle motion of waves touching the shoreline. There's a kind of mathematics under that motion. Not superstition. Memory. I know you, I said to the spiral, and felt slightly foolish, and slightly less alone. If Alex was right, and she usually is, then somewhere over Chile, the dishes had listened, and the sky had answered with a shape our people have been drawing on stone since we learned to look without blinking. The thought made my throat tight and my hands steady. The fear that had been stalking the edges of the morning, fear of being ridiculous, fear of being wrong, stepped back and let something older through. A promise, perhaps. Or only the old household vow, do the work and let the field decide. I folded her letter along its existing crease and slipped it into the atlas under N for no reason other than superstition and the small pleasure of hiding a bright thing where I can reach it. I set the disc atop the notebook and weighed both with the stone paperweight. I picked up years ago off a Kerry strand, the kind of stone you keep because your palm tells you it's yours. Before I left the office for the lab I did something I have not done in a long time. I turned off the lamp and stood in the near dark, eyes adjusting to the blue of fog pressed up against the window. I took the bronze disc in both hands and held it at my sternum, where a talk would lie if I were the man from my vision, or from the stories my grandmother told when the wind pushed smoke back down the chimney. Neit, I said into the dimness, testing the grain of the name on my tongue, feeling the room pause. Keep the ground, then. And keep us honest upon it. A ridiculous prayer. Or not a prayer at all. A courtesy, perhaps, to an old keeper. I felt no sign, no change in air, only the steady tick of the radiator and the curious ease that comes when you have finally said the thing you meant to say. I slipped the disc back onto the blotter and reached for my coat. The handle turned warm under my hand. As I stepped into the hallway, a surprising sense of calm and quiet greeted me. The fog had thinned by then, light pooled at the stairwell like water collects at a cut bank. Footsteps passed above and a laugh fell through the stairwell and broke. I took my time descending. The building's stone had kept its cool. On the ground floor I paused at the glass door and looked out at the quad. The mist lifted in ragged veils. The bell tower ghosted. A boy in a red cap crossed with a stack of books and the certainty that moves in young legs. I should have gone straight to the lab. Instead, I turned left, to the small chapel that sits like a quiet pocket under the eaves. I don't go for worship. The room holds a shade of silence that does not belong to this century. The door creaked and the old wood received me. Dust motes hung like small planets in the beam from the lancet window. At the far wall a brass plaque remembered names whose families no longer walk these halls. I sat in the back pew and let the quiet push the day into a shape I could carry. The mind, when it is ready, will find its lines. Triscale, 3 arms, 3 currents, 3 winds. war, harvest, navigation. Birth, death, return. Ground, blade, sky. The old triads we recite without knowing we recite them. And under them a simpler triad still: look, measure, keep faith. A gust poured at the window. The pews creaked, or perhaps I did. I don't know how long I sat there, but when I rose the fog had thinned from pewter to pearl. I walked back to the office because I couldn't help it, because something in the room might have shifted in my absence, because sometimes you leave a thing alone and it decides to be generous. Nothing had moved, of course. The lamp stood unlit. The letter slept in its atlas. The disc waited like a coin on a tavern table. But the air felt different, lighter, as if something had exhaled. On the desk lay my grandmother's pocket calendar. I hadn't seen it when I left, perhaps I'd uncovered it when I moved the atlas. The little book had followed me across a dozen flats, brown leather, strap too long, the year on the front rubbed to ghosting. I opened it to the first page and read the old penciled lines in the slanted hand that possessed me in winter: some gods take, some hold. Neat holds. On the facing page she had drawn a clumsy spiral and 3 short lines beneath it, like footprints returning. A smile crossed my face, catching me off guard. The world had sent up a small, harmless sign from the seam between sense and nonsense, the seam where my work lives. I touched the pencil mark with my thumb and felt the paper give a little, as if it remembered the pressure. "All right," I said aloud to the empty room, to the fog, to the bronze, to the old god who favors fields and the sister who favors sky. "I'm listening." I put the calendar in my pocket. I put the disc, wrapped in a lint-free cloth, into the shallow drawer with the soft sliders. I left the letter where it was hidden and took only the knowledge of it with me. When I locked the door, I stood for a breath with my hand on the key, because that is what you do when a threshold asks you to be polite. The corridor seemed brighter. Maeve's laughter spilled out of the kitchenette, and someone argued cheerfully with the machine about its definition of cappuccino. I managed a smile and lifted a hand and said, "Later," and meant it. There would be coffee, there would be soil samples, there would be the measurable day. And then, when her separate message came from wherever she had chosen to hide it, there would be the spiral written in the breath of space, and the listening dishes on the Atacama, and the quiet alignment between a Chilean sky and a field in Meath where men once set their teeth and did not blink. On the way down the stairs my phone vibrated once. Not the university tone. Not her either. A courier notification, a small parcel registered from London, signature required. I almost dismissed it before the old habit of attention tugged at my sleeve. The sender line was blank. The reference number felt familiar in the way numbers can if you've seen their cousins. I filed it in the shelf behind my eyes. The day was already full. One omen at a time. Outside, the fog had become a lace that wind could lift. The bell tower showed its ribs. On Nassau Street buses sighed and a woman with a blue umbrella spoke into the rain in a language I did not know. The world went on with its fine indifference and I let it. I stood for a moment at the edge of the quad, feeling the ground under my soles, the long patient ground, and the clean edge of the air on my face. An old god loves an honest morning. A field does not lie. "Hold the ground," I said under my breath, and if anyone heard, they would only think me rehearsing a lecture or an oath. It was both. 2. The Hill of Battles. POV, Dr. Rhys Morgan, First Person Limited. In County Meath the fog was different from Dublin's. In the city it clung to rooftops and blurred the edges of the modern world. Here, in the open fields, it became something older, something that rose from the earth itself, carrying stories and breath and the faint iron smell of ancient soil. As the van turned down the narrow road toward the excavation site, the mist shifted like a living thing, rolling across the ground in pale waves that obscured and revealed the landscape in soft pulses, as though the land itself were breathing. The Hill of Battles waited somewhere ahead of us. Even before I stepped out of the van, the place hummed beneath my feet, a low, almost imperceptible vibration that traveled through the tires, through the metal door, through the air. At first, I thought it was the engine. But when I switched it off, the hum remained. A strange welcome. It was earlier than we normally began, but I'd slept poorly after receiving Alex's letter. My mind hadn't stopped circling the spiral she described. The triskele haunting the waveform. The bronze disc sitting in my drawer like a heartbeat wrapped in cloth. The coincidence was too sharp, too sure of itself, as if the world were trying to speak through symbols older than language. The hill of battles was quiet when I stepped out, the air cold enough to shock my lungs. The fog lay thick across the field, blurring the dig trenches, the scattering of tarpaulin sheets, the skeletal frames of temporary shelters. Only the tops of the old hawthorn trees were visible above the mist, their branches like skeletal hands reaching into a sky growing faintly gold at the edges. A raven called somewhere out of sight. Then silence. I let the morning settle around me. This place had weight. History, yes, but also something older than the battles recorded in manuscripts. Something the land remembered even when the people did not. This field keeps its dead close, one of the volunteers had murmured yesterday after finding a badly corroded spearhead. Too close. I had brushed it off at the time. But today the words lingered. I walked toward the central trench, Trench C, where we had uncovered the outer line of a wooden palisade 2 days earlier. The soil had been difficult, heavy with clay and stubborn roots. And beneath it, fragments of bronze and bone that told us we had found more than a simple settlement site. The markings on the bronze disc had made the volunteers uneasy. Made me uneasy. I reached the edge of the trench now. The fog pooled inside it like water in a hollow. I could barely see the bottom. Dr. Morgan. I turned. A young researcher, Amon, stood with a tablet in hand, his breath ghosting in the cold. "You're in early," he said. "So are you." He shrugged. "Place gives me the creeps at night. Figured I'd get ahead rather than dream about it." He walked alongside me to the trench. The fog made his features indistinct until he stepped closer. "You feel that?" he asked quietly. "The vibration?" I murmured back. "Yeah." We stood still, listening. The ground seemed to thrum with a distant pulse, deep and steady. Not mechanical. Not natural either. Like the earth remembering something under its breath. I descended the ladder into the trench. The fog thinned as we dropped below its upper veil. The soil walls glistened with moisture, dark and dense. I ran my fingers lightly over the exposed clay layer, tracing the faint impressions of rotted wooden stakes that once formed the defensive palisade. The Hill of Battles had earned its name long before archaeologists arrived. Local folklore claimed the area was where Neit, Celtic god of war, walked with his warriors, choosing where to grant strength and where to take it away. Villagers avoided the hill at night. Farmers refused to plow too deep. I had dismissed much of this as superstition. But the bronze disc we found had changed something in me. The spiral engraved upon it almost matched Alex's description. I hadn't intended to bring it today. It felt reckless, almost sacrilegious. But before leaving the office, I had paused, then slipped it quietly into my coat pocket. As though the relic needed to be here. Amon knelt beside the soil pit where the disc had been found. "Instruments are going strange again," he said. "The EM reader keeps spiking." "Show me." He handed me the tablet. The readings fluctuated wildly, sharp peaks and falls occurring in irregular intervals, but with a strange underlying pattern, like a heartbeat trying to synchronize with something unseen. "This started 20 minutes ago," Amon said. "The spikes get stronger the closer you stand to the west wall." The west wall was where the disc had been hidden, buried vertically like a coin placed deliberately in the earth. I approached slowly. The hum deepened as I drew nearer, vibrating up through the soles of my boots and into my bones. The air felt thicker, charged, as though lightning were trapped beneath the soil. I touched the wall gently. The moment my fingers brushed the clay, the bronze disc in my pocket warmed against my chest. The warmth pulsed once. Then again. A steady rhythm. The same rhythm as the peaks in the EM readings. I inhaled sharply. "Dr. Morgan?" Amon asked. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I lied. Just thinking. I withdrew the disc from my pocket carefully. Even in the dim light of the trench, the spirals carved into its surface caught what little illumination there was, returning it in faint, intricate patterns. Amon stared. That's the artifact we found. Yes. It's glowing. It's just reflecting light. But that wasn't true. The glow had a faint internal quality, as though something inside the bronze breathed along with the earth beneath us. Amon took a step backward. I don't like that thing. I didn't either. But I couldn't look away. I crouched near the wall and held the disc inches from the soil. The hum intensified. The spiral line seemed to pulse with a faint coppery warmth. What if, I murmured to myself, this wasn't a grave offering or ornament, but a marker? A marker of what? Amon asked. Before I could answer, the ground beneath my feet vibrated sharply, strong enough to rattle my knees. A thin line of loose soil trickled down the wall like sand falling through an hourglass. Then, something else happened. A pattern appeared in the soil. It formed slowly, emerging as the clay shifted under the vibration, but unmistakably coalescing into 3 curving arms radiating outward from a center point. A spiral. A triskeal. In the earth. My breath caught. Amon swore under his breath and stepped back. Jesus Christ. Don't touch anything, I said quietly, though my voice trembled. Just watch. The pattern was perfect. Too perfect for soil settling naturally. As though something beneath the earth had shaped it. The spiral grew clearer. 3 arms sweeping outward in flawless symmetry. I held the disc beside it. The match was exact. Dr. Morgan, Amon whispered. We need to call someone. The university? No. The force of my own answer surprised me. But I knew it immediately. Calling the department, alerting officials, inviting committees would smother this moment beneath bureaucracy and cynicism. And Alex had warned me. Avoid normal channels. This could be seismic activity, Amon said, voice shaking. Gas pockets, fault shifts, it isn't, I said softly. How do you know? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know in any scientific way. I knew because the air itself felt alive. Because the hum thrummed through my bones like an old drumbeat. Because the bronze disc in my hand felt less like an artifact and more like a key. I pressed the disc lightly against the soil where the spiral had formed. The hum intensified sharply. The disc's surface warmed again. A faint vibration traveled from the metal into my palm. Then the soil beneath the disc moved. Not collapsed. Not crumbled. Moved. It flexed inward, as though the earth itself recoiled from the bronze. Amon scrambled backward, shouting, Stop! Dr. Morgan, stop! It's unstable. 3. Whispers of Neit. POV, Dr. Reese Morgan First Person Limited. The night settled over the hill of battles like a great cloak, heavy and silent, pinning the world beneath its weight. The fog that had haunted the morning had finally lifted, leaving behind a sky so sharp with stars it looked as though someone had scattered shards of frost across black glass. The air was colder than it should have been for early autumn, biting, metallic, as if something beneath the soil exhaled winter with every breath. We had closed the excavation for the evening hours earlier, but I found myself unable to leave the field. The discovery of the second disc had anchored itself in my chest, vibrating quietly like a second heartbeat. Even now, as I stood just beyond the trench, the memory of that hum echoed through my bones. The earth had spoken. Not loudly, but undeniably. Amon had gone home shaken, muttering about cursed objects and electromagnetic anomalies. The volunteers had departed in silence, glancing back more than once, as though expecting the ground to shift behind them. I remained. I told myself I was here to catalogue data, to photograph the newly uncovered patterns in the soil, to prepare proper documentation before the morning thaw. But deep down, I knew the truth. I couldn't leave because something in this place wanted me to stay. The air smelled of peat and old iron, like the breath of earth freshly torn open. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself and walked the perimeter of the field, scanning the horizon. The hawthorn trees stood hunched like old soldiers, their branches crooked with age and memory. The grass whispered around my boots. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a fox barked, sharp, sudden. Then silence reclaimed everything. The excavated discs were locked safely in my field case, stored within the small weatherproof hut we used for equipment. But I could feel them even from here, those spirals carved with an intelligence that transcended ornament. Patterns that linked Ireland to something far older, far wider, far stranger. When I looked up again at the stars, their cold shimmer seemed to pulse in time with the echoing hum I had felt underground. A shiver went through me. Across time. Across land. Across sky. The idea was absurd. And yet, the field felt different now. As if something beneath the surface had shifted its weight and turned its face upward, watching. Something old. Something waiting. I exhaled slowly, letting the cold air scrape down my throat, and returned to the equipment hut. I set my notes down, unzipped my case, and carefully lifted the discs, one recovered from the trench weeks ago, the other just hours old. Their surfaces caught the moonlight like polished eyes. 2 spirals, nearly identical. 2 messages. 2 calls. It can't be coincidence, I murmured. The wind answered with a low sigh. I placed both discs on a cloth-covered crate, side by side. The moonlight felt stronger now, almost unnaturally bright. It washed over the bronze surfaces, revealing threads of pattern too fine to see by lamplight, tiny etchings around the spirals, like star paths or the faint strokes of an ancient script. My pulse quickened. These weren't decorative relics. They were deliberate. Precise. Encoded. Something in me, some instinct I'd suppressed for years, recognized the weight of that truth. I needed to think. To breathe. To step away before I lost myself in a spiral of conjecture that would endanger my career, and, more importantly, endanger Alex. Her letter had been clear, secrecy was crucial. Observation first. Understanding second. Caution above all. So, I left the hut, took only the small lamp and my field notebook, and walked back toward the hill's crest. The moon hung directly overhead now, a pale and silent sentinel. Its light coated the grass in silver. The field seemed brighter than it should, as if caught in some lingering glow from an unseen wildfire. I reached the ridge and stood still. This was where the ancient warriors would have stood before battle. Where they would have gathered, blades dulled by soil yet bright with the promise of dawn. Where they would have invoked the Celtic god Neit, not as a figure of worship, but as the inevitable force of the field itself. I closed my eyes and listened. At first, nothing. Then the faintest hum, deep, resonant, like breath moving through a stone chamber. The same sound that had risen beneath us earlier, now distant but perceptible, threading through the night like a warning. The wind stirred, brushing my hair back. The hum grew stronger. The stars above me flickered, not in their usual twinkling, but in a sharper, rhythmic pulse. Like a signal. A heartbeat. I opened my eyes. And the world tilted. The stars spun, not wildly, but with a terrifying grace, forming 3 great spirals, arms reaching inward toward a single point of darkness. A triskele. In the sky. My breath snagged in my throat. The spirals contracted. The wind roared. The earth beneath my feet shuddered. The field dissolved into darkness. The dream. I stood on the hill again, but it was no longer my hill. This was the hill of battles as it once was, before centuries buried its scars. The fog was gone, instead, torches burned from long poles driven into the soil, casting red light that flickered across the valley. The air reeked of smoke and sweat and iron. Shapes moved around me, figures with heavy braids, bronze spears, shields marked with swirling patterns of power. Warriors. Silent. Focused. Their presence charged the night like raw electricity. Every instinct screamed that this was not a dream. This was memory. Echo. Inheritance. A figure approached through the ranks. He was taller than the others, broad-shouldered, bare-chested despite the cold. His skin was painted in sweeping spirals of dark blue pigment that gleamed in the torchlight. His hair was braided down one side, tied with bone and bronze beads. A torque of shining gold rested around his throat, its ends shaped like the heads of ravens. His eyes were pale, too pale, almost silver. Inhuman. Unblinking. He carried a spear taller than I was. When he stood before me, the torches flickered lower, as if the air bowed to him. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed inside my skull, not spoken aloud. Not heard. But felt. Seeker of stars. My breath hitched. My hands trembled. He stepped closer. The ground vibrated beneath his feet, as though acknowledging him. His gaze bore through me, searching, evaluating, tearing through my skin and settling in the bones beneath. You carry the mark of the field. The spirals on his chest pulsed faintly. The discs in my coat pocket, though this was a dream, burned hot against my ribs. I swallowed. My voice, when it came, was rough, strained. What do you want from me? The warrior tilted his head. The pale eyes glimmered. The sky calls. The stones answer. The field awakens. He lifted his spear, placing its bronze tip against the ground. The earth pulsed with light, lines of fire racing outward like roots seeking their way home. Neit walks, the warrior intoned. And you will walk with him. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my throat. I don't understand. His stare sharpened. You do. He raised one hand, and the spirals on his skin ignited, golden, swirling, radiant. The light poured from him, spilling across the field, reflecting in the eyes of the silent warriors surrounding us. The torches guttered. The ground shook. The stars above twisted again into the triskele shape, glowing red as embers. The gate opens. He stepped closer until his breath mingled with mine. Find the island where the stone watches. Follow the path the sky has carved. Before the war returns. The wind screamed. The earth cracked. The light swallowed everything, and the dream shattered into darkness. The waking. I woke on the cold ground outside the hut, gasping, drenched in sweat that chilled instantly in the night air. My heart hammered so violently I thought it might burst. For a moment the sky spun above me, dark spirals twisting across the stars. But when I blinked, the heavens were still again. A faint, sharp pain pulsed behind my eyes. I pushed myself upright slowly, breath still ragged. My coat was damp with dew. My notebook lay beside me where it had fallen. And then I saw it. The bronze fragment. It lay on the grass a few feet away, the smaller disc, the one unearthed a day earlier. I had left it inside the hut. But now, it glowed. A faint, soft radiance. Not bright. Not supernatural. But undeniable. A steady copper light, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. I crawled toward it slowly, my breath fogging the air. The closer I came, the warmer it grew, not hot, but vibrantly alive. I reached out and touched it. The moment my skin met bronze, an image flickered through my mind, the warrior's pale eyes. The spirals burning on his skin. The words, find the island where the stone watches. Rapa Nui. The island of the Moai. A place I had never been. A place I knew almost nothing about. But the connection hit me with such certainty that I felt it physically, an invisible thread pulling tight between island and a far-off island in the Pacific Ocean. My throat tightened. Alex. Alma. The spiral in the stars. Everything was coming together in ways I could no longer dismiss. The bronze disc pulsed again. Once. Twice. A third time. I closed my fingers around it, holding it tightly. The glow faded gradually, like an ember cooling after a breath of air. The night regained its silence. I breathed in the cold, damp air and let it steady me. The dream's echoes lingered behind my ribs, vibrating faintly like a trapped heartbeat. The warrior's voice whispered across my memory, before the war returns. A warning. Or a prophecy. The ground beneath me was still now, but no longer felt empty. The hill of battles had awakened something. And something had awakened in me. My gaze shifted toward the hut, where the larger disc waited, silent and dormant in moonlight. Not for long. I rose slowly, pocketing the glowing fragment. The night wind pressed against my face, carrying a chill that felt almost like a breath on my skin. Ireland was no longer alone in its whispering. The stars were speaking. The stones were remembering. And the god of war, silent for centuries, was stirring. I knew then that whatever awaited me across the sea, whatever secret lay under the watchful stone faces of Rapa Nui, I would be drawn into it. Because Neit had spoken. And I had heard. But the night was not finished with me. A sudden rustle swept across the field, not loud, not violent, but deliberate, as though a hand had brushed through the tall grass. I froze. The wind had dropped, leaving the air sharp and motionless, too still for anything natural. Yet the whisper moved again, circling the excavation site in a slow, precise arc. For a moment I felt as though the entire hill inhaled. And then, something shifted. Not in the physical world, not in any way my senses could quantify. But deep beneath the surface of perception. A subtle turn, like a key clicking home inside a lock buried under centuries of earth. My pulse hammered. The bronze fragment in my pocket warmed again, faint but certain. The soil beneath my boots vibrated with a muted tremor I could feel only in my bones. I turned toward the ridge. A low mist was forming there, coiling over the grass like smoke rising from an unseen fire. In the moonlight, it shimmered faintly, shades of silver, blue, and something darker, almost red, threading through its edges. The fog moved slowly, lazily, as though pulled by a rhythm too ancient for human hearing. A figure seemed to flicker within it, just for an instant. Tall. Shadowed. A hint of braid. A glint of bronze. I blinked hard. The figure dissolved. The mist collapsed on itself, swallowed by the night. But the presence remained. The sensation pressed deeper into me, a gravity pulling inward, toward the center of the hill, toward the unseen heart of something greater than relics, greater than myth. The land hummed with the memory of footsteps older than the paths we walk now. Footsteps that echoed still beneath the layers of soil and story. A gust of cold air swept across the ridge, tugging at my coat. My breath clouded in front of me. Then I heard it. Not out loud. Not in my ears. A whisper unfurling behind my ribs, low and resonant, "Come." The word spiraled through me like a pulse of light. I staggered, gripping my coat, struggling to steady myself against a force that seemed to vibrate through the very marrow of my bones. My knees weakened. My vision blurred around the edges. Time thinned. The field darkened, not in shadow, but in significance. Every blade of grass, every stone, every gust of air seemed alive with intention. It felt as if the land itself had leaned in to listen. As though it expected something from me. As though it already knew what choice I would make. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the sudden pressure. Behind my lids, the dream warrior's face burned bright, those pale eyes, unblinking, fixed on me with wordless certainty. The spirals painted across his chest glowed again, turning and turning in endless symmetry. And behind him, the silhouette of an island rising from black water. Stone faces staring into the void. Stars arranged in patterns no modern chart recognized. A sky heavy with war. Follow. The whisper cracked through my mind like lightning. I gasped and opened my eyes. The world snapped back into its ordinary shapes, field, hut, trees, stars. But none of it felt ordinary anymore. The hill's silence trembled, briefly, almost imperceptibly, as though something enormous had taken a step beneath the surface. The vibration rippled outward in a slow wave that fizzled into nothing as it reached the far edge of the field. My heart thundered. The bronze fragment throbbed once more in my pocket, then stilled. I breathed out, long and unsteady. Somewhere far across the world, under another sky, stone faces watched the ocean night after night, century after century, unmoving, unblinking. Waiting. The warrior's command echoed sharply inside me, "Find the island where the stone watches before the war returns." The night wind stirred again, brushing past me like a cold hand. I shivered. I turned toward the distant horizon, though I could not see it through the night. But the direction was meaningless, every path now pointed the same way. West, south, across the sea, across the world, to a place I had never been, to secrets older than Ireland's stones, to a war forgotten by history but not by the gods. A tremor of anticipation, fear, or destiny, I could not tell, moved through me like a second heartbeat. "I hear you," I whispered into the night. The wind fell silent at once, as if satisfied. The moon dimmed behind a slow-moving veil of cloud. And the hill of battles exhaled. The whisper of grass around me folded into a hush so complete it felt sacred. The stars overhead shimmered once. Only once. Like an acknowledgement. Then the world went still. Utterly still. I stood in the cold silence of the ancient hill, the last echo of Neit's call fading through my chest, and realized with a clarity that steadied and unnerved me in equal measure, this was no dream. No vision. Not imagination. Not madness. This was a summons. A god of war had stirred. And somehow, across centuries, across oceans, across the very fabric of the world, he had chosen me. 4. Museum of the Lost Gods. POV, Rees POV times Foggy Gothic London, First Person Limited. London received me in a shroud of pale, restless fog that blurred every hard edge of the city into something dreamlike and uncertain. It was as if the fog had followed me across the Irish Sea, coiling silently into the fairies' wake, waiting for the moment I stepped onto English soil before thickening and closing around me like a second skin. By the time the taxi rolled into Bloomsbury, the city outside the window had become a series of silhouettes, ghostly outlines of buildings rising and falling behind curtains of mist. Headlights glowed like lanterns in a graveyard. The muted thrum of London's perpetual hum felt strangely distant, swallowed whole by the fog's muffled embrace. I rubbed condensation from the window with the side of my fist and leaned closer. The city didn't feel like itself. London was usually a beast of noise, movement, endless motion. Tonight, it felt paused. As though something vast and ancient had draped itself across its shoulders, bidding it to be still. The taxi slowed beside a wide iron gate set within a high stone wall. The driver leaned back toward me. "Royal Museum of Antiquities, sir. Best of luck in there." His tone suggested he would prefer not to linger. I paid him, stepped out, and the night air closed in instantly cold, metallic, damp. The fog tasted of soot and old secrets. Ahead of me stretched the museum courtyard, its cobblestones glistening with moisture. Lamps cast orange halos that dissolved only inches from their source. The great shape of the museum loomed beyond, its pillars, staircases, and high-arched entries swallowed in silvery murk, only glimpsed in fleeting fragments. The place looked less like a public institution and more like a citadel built to defend something the world had forgotten how to name. My pulse steadied itself with the familiar sensation of old stone and deeper silence. If Ireland's hills whispered small truths, London's museums whispered the ones too large to fit in human ears. A gust of wind curled past me, dragging my coat sideways. The fog stirred. And for the briefest moment, I imagined a figure standing at the museum doors, tall, unmoving, waiting. I blinked. The shape dissolved. Only shadows remained. I climbed the wide staircase, boots clicking hollowly on the stone steps. At the top, the enormous oak doors swung inward with no sound at all. A single figure stood behind them. "Dr. Morgan," she said, her voice soft yet echoing slightly in the cavernous hall. "Welcome home." Dr. Evelyn Merriweather stepped forward, warm light from the vestibule lanterns catching the edge of her profile. Every line of her posture was precise, measured, like a curator assessing the condition of a priceless relic. She wore a long charcoal coat, cinched at the waist, and her dark hair was pinned back in a sleek twist. "It's good to see you," she said, though her eyes searched my face with an intensity that made my breath hitch. "You're pale. Was the crossing that bad?" You have no idea, I thought. Dream warrior. Whispers. The spiral in the soil. Neat. But I forced a smile. Long day. Long week. Her expression softened. Come inside. The cold out here bites like a starving thing. She led me through the vestibule and into the grand hall, a cathedral of marble, shadow, and quiet. Pillars soared upward into looming arches. Glass cases lined the walkways like sentinels guarding sleeping gods. The air smelled faintly of stone dust, polished wood, and something older like parchment buried too long in darkness. My footsteps echoed. The building seemed to listen. We closed early today, Evelyn said quietly. Staff shortages. Or so I was told. Her tone didn't match her explanation. London rarely closed museums early. Something felt off. Hardly anyone about, she added. It will give us space to review your exhibit without crowds. My throat tightened. Space was exactly what I did not want tonight. Come, she said, her voice warming again. Your gallery awaits. We moved deeper into the museum. The lights dimmed gradually, transitioning from practical brightness to a warm amber glow meant to evoke firelight and torchlit chambers. The theme suited my work far too well. Evelyn brought me to a set of heavy carved doors, Celtic spirals etched deeply into the wood. My breath caught. The design was nearly identical to the symbol engraved on the bronze discs. She pushed the doors open. The gallery beyond was vast, reverent, draped in amber gold light that touched every artifact like a blessing or a warning. Beneath the vaulted ceiling, shadowed alcoves held relics from Ireland, Scotland, and Scandinavia, gods of war, guardians, kings forgotten. Your pieces anchor this wing, Evelyn said, gesturing toward the central display. I approached carefully. Behind a curved sheet of glass lay the bronze disc we had unearthed in Meath, the first one. My heart squeezed. Even here, far from its resting place, the spiral seemed to shine with a life of its own. I dared not check whether it was glowing. Not here. Not in front of her. You did well, Reese, she said. This feels monumental. Myths often do. She gave me a sharp look. There's a difference between myth and presence. Presence. The exact word for Neit. For the warrior. For the whisper beneath the hill. Evelyn hesitated then, something flickering in her eyes. Are you feeling all right? She asked. You look like a man standing at the edge of a revelation, or a cliff. I don't know, I admitted. Not yet. That satisfied her more than any reassurance could have. Truth had a strange way of calming scholars. She moved toward a long oak table set beneath a spotlight. I wasn't sure whether to tell you tonight or wait until morning, she said. But you might want to sit for this. My pulse quickened. What is it? This arrived for you. She lifted a small, cream-colored envelope with the emblem I'd seen earlier. The one with 3 curved lines. 3 arms. A spiraled shape. A symbol like a triskele twisted in unfamiliar hands. I swallowed hard. The Polynesian funding offer. I read it, I admitted. During the tour. Then you know they've taken an interest in your work. Too much interest. Too soon. Yes, she said softly. That's why I hesitated. Her voice dropped lower. Reese, they asked for you by name. Your name. Not the department. Not the museum. The air felt suddenly thick. How could they possibly know me? That's what unsettles me. I took the letter and reread the lines, but this time each word landed differently. Heavier. Sharper. We trust the stones have guided you this far. May they continue to do so. I closed my eyes briefly. This foundation didn't just know what I discovered. They knew what was guiding me. Who is their war god? I asked quietly. Marana, she whispered. Said to be a guardian, a destroyer, and a guide. A war god from a world across the sea. A god who shared symbols with Neit. Evelyn must have read the tension on my face. There's something else. She gestured toward a small security monitor set in the corner of the gallery. A still frame was frozen on the screen. A snapshot from an hour earlier. In the image, the gallery was empty, except for one impossible detail. The bronze disc was shining. Faintly. Softly. Just enough to be unmistakable. My chest tightened. My breath froze. "You see it," she said. "Yes," I whispered. The glow in the soil. The glow in the hut. Now this. Evelyn lowered her voice to a hush. It happened again as the camera recorded. The lights flickered. And she hesitated. The temperature in the room dropped by nearly 4 degrees. I lifted my gaze sharply. 4? Yes. The number weighed heavily in the air. 4, the number of thresholds. Crossroads. Transition points. Did anything else happen? I asked. She pressed her lips together, then nodded once. In the second recording, something moved. My pulse hammered. Moved. I whispered. What moved? She walked toward the central case and placed her palm lightly on the glass. Not the disc itself, she said, but the shadows around it. She inhaled slowly. They shifted. As if something walked past it. I stared at her. Walked? My voice cracked. Evelyn, shadows don't just walk. I know, she murmured. That's why I called you. Not the department. Not security. Not her staff. Me. Only me. We stood together in front of the central case, staring at the bronze disc. Then something changed. A low tremor rippled through the floor. The faintest hum, just like the one from the Hill of Battles, rose through the soles of my shoes. Evelyn stiffened. There. Did you feel that? Yes. My hand went instinctively to my coat pocket. The smaller disc pulsed against my ribs. Once. Twice. 3 times. The hum grew stronger. The lights dimmed. The temperature dropped. Reese, Evelyn whispered sharply, what is? The hum crescendoed. And the spiral engraved on the bronze disc shimmered, not bright, not glowing, but turning. Turning, in a slow, impossible rotation. As though the metal itself breathed and shifted under an invisible hand. Evelyn gasped and stumbled backward. The hum cut off instantly. The light steadied. Silence blanketed the gallery. The disc sat motionless. Inert. Harmless. As though nothing had happened. But something had. Something impossible. Evelyn touched her forehead, still pale. I can't explain this, she whispered. And I don't think I want to. She looked at me, really looked. You need to meet with the Foundation, Reese. Whoever they are. Wherever they are from. Whatever they want. She swallowed. It's already started. I glanced again at the letter in my hand. Rapa Nui. The island of the Stone Watchers. The warriors whisper in my dream. Find the island where the stone watches. Before the war returns. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. This was the pull. The invisible thread tightening. The path laid beneath my feet by ancient hands. I'll meet them, I said. Evelyn nodded slowly. Their representative arrives tomorrow morning, she said. He asked specifically to meet you here. At the museum? Yes. At dawn. A strange choice. The hour of thresholds. Evelyn placed a hand briefly on my arm, warm, human, grounding. Be careful, Reese. This feels larger than all of us. Her words hung in the cold air. I turned to leave the gallery but paused when the faintest whisper curled past my ear, the same whisper I had heard on the hill. Come. I froze. The word drifted from no direction and every direction. The air quivered. The bronze disc inside the case shimmered once more, so faintly I almost doubted my own eyes. Then all was still. I exhaled shakily and stepped away from the display. London's fog pressed thick against the windows. Beyond it, the city slept restlessly. The war god was stirring. Not just Neit, but his mirror across the world. Marana. And tomorrow morning, I would meet the first emissary of a path laid centuries before I was born. Something ancient was waking. Something that crossed oceans and time. And it had chosen me. 5. The Shadow of Alma. POV, Dr. Rees Morgan, First Person Limited. Dawn in London arrived not as light but as a pale dilution of darkness, soft and directionless, as though the sun had lost its way somewhere beyond the fog. I had slept little, drifting in and out of uneasy dreams that dissolved when I reached for them. By 6, I surrendered to wakefulness and rose from the narrow museum accommodation that Evelyn had arranged, an old curator's suite tucked beneath the north wing, its windows small and its walls older than the concept of electricity. The fog had not lifted. I dressed quickly, my clothes still faintly smelling of Dublin's damp and the peat-heavy wind from the Hill of Battles. As I tied my laces, a memory struck, my grandmother bending over my childhood boots, telling me never to walk uncertain ground without greeting it first. The land carries old quarrels, she had whispered, pulling the knot tight. Step honest, our eyes, or the old quarrels will remember. I touched the floor with my bare foot before slipping on the shoe, an instinct I had not indulged in years. The stone was cold, but steady. When I stepped into the corridor, the museum felt as silent as a tomb. Lights hummed faintly overhead. Somewhere far off, a cleaning trolley squeaked and fell quiet again. My footsteps echoed along the polished stone. Evelyn had told me to meet the Polynesian Foundation representative at 7 in the East Atrium. It was barely a minute past 6 now, but I needed time. Time to think. Time to breathe, time to read Alex's message again. In the small lounge off the main atrium, place furnished with worn leather chairs and a table stacked with old exhibition catalogues, I withdrew the envelope I had found slipped beneath my door when I woke. My breath caught when I saw the wax seal. A 5-point star with spiral arms. Alex's mark. But this seal was different from the last one. The spirals were sharper, more elaborate, almost frantic in their precision. As though they had been carved in haste, or under some pressing necessity. I cracked the seal with my thumb, the wax snapping like a dry shell. Inside was a single sheet, folded in half, the edges slightly smudged, as if handled by someone in a hurry. At the top, in faint penciled script only visible when held to the light, was the authenticate phrase she had promised, "The field keeps its own." My grandmother's words. My chest tightened. Beneath it, ink dark and decisive, ran Alex's message. I read it once. Then again. Then a third time, slower, letting each line strike its mark. Rees. The pattern is not local interference. Not cosmic noise. The dishes caught it again last night, same structure, same rhythm, same ratio. When mapped against known astronomical arrays, it aligns with nothing in modern charts. But when overlaid on prehistoric carvings, Irish, Andean, Rapa Nui, the match is exact. You read that right. Exact. I paused, my hand trembling slightly. Alex never exaggerated. I kept reading. I started with the Irish stones because I knew you would think of them too. The triscale on the disc from your Mead excavation. The waveform follows the same geometry. Measured it twice. Then 5 times. I was shaking when I realized what it meant. The sky is repeating a pattern carved into the earth thousands of years ago. The lounge seemed to shrink around me. Even the air grew thin. And this is not the strangest part. I broadened the comparison. The spirals from Rapa Nui, the petroglyphs near Orongo, those you once mentioned in passing, carry the same proportions. Not similar. Identical. Same arm length. Same curvature. Same inward turn. Same center point void. My pulse hammered so loudly it drowned out the distant hum of the museum's heating vents. Asterisk asterisk whatever this signal is, it is not local. It is not random. It is not new. And it has spoken before, in stone, across continents, across oceans, across cultures that never met. Asterisk asterisk a faint tremor ran through me, fear, or the deep unsettling certainty that the world was stepping into a shape I had glimpsed only in dreams and myth. I read the final lines. I know what you found in me. I don't need you to say it. The ground remembers. It is remembering now. Be careful. Someone else is watching the data. I don't know who. Not yet. The next alignment happens tomorrow night. I'll send you the coordinates if I'm able. Until then, listen to the ground. You always were better at that than I am. The room spun. I lowered the paper, pressing my thumb into its fold as though anchoring myself through pressure alone. Island. Chile. Rapa Nui. 3 points on the planet. 3 ancient cultures. 3 sets of spirals carved by hand separated by vast oceans and centuries. And now the sky was whispering the same geometry. It was too much for coincidence. Too precise for folklore. Too old for science as we know it. Neit had stirred in the ground. And someone, was stirring in the sky. I folded the letter with care and slipped it into the inner pocket of my coat, close enough that I could feel its weight against my chest. A floorboard creaked behind me. I turned sharply. No one stood in the doorway. Only fog pressed against the window from outside, drifting like breath from a sleeping giant. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and stepped deeper into the atrium. The East Atrium was one of the museum's newest spaces, glass, iron, and stone curving upward into a high dome that swallowed sound like a cathedral meant for forgotten gods. Even at dawn, the fog outside blurred the edges of the glass, giving the room an ethereal glow. Evelyn stood near the base of the grand staircase, her silhouette nearly lost in the soft haze. She turned as I approached. "You're early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." Her eyes flicked toward the inner pocket of my coat, as though she sensed the letter inside, its urgency, its gravity. "You look worse than last night," she said gently. "Did something happen?" I considered telling her about the letter. About the signal. About the triskele speaking in wavelengths across the world. But my throat closed. Trust was not the problem. Language was. I could not shape the words into something that wouldn't sound like madness. "Just tired," I said. She didn't believe me. But she let it go. "He will be here soon," she said. The representative. The Rapa Nui Foundation man. A chill brushed the back of my neck. "What do you know about him?" I asked. "Almost nothing," she admitted. "His name is Hara. Or at least, that is the name in the correspondence. He insisted on meeting you here. At dawn. Strange hour. The strangest," she murmured. "And yet, fitting." The air hummed faintly. Not with sound, more with pressure, as though the room were waiting to inhale. Evelyn's gaze drifted toward the spiral doors leading to my gallery. "Reese? Last night. After you left." The disc, she swallowed. It pulsed again. My breath hitched. "How many times?" 3. My pulse stuttered. That rhythm again. 3 pulses. 3 arms. 3 spirals. 3 continents. Before I could speak, Evelyn stiffened. She leaned slightly toward me, her voice barely a whisper. Someone's coming. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Echoing in the fog-muted hall. A figure emerged from the far end of the atrium. Tall. Thin. Wrapped in a long coat the color of volcanic ash. His skin was bronze like sun-weathered stone. His hair, dark and tied back. His eyes, I froze. His eyes were pale. Not blue. Not gray. Pale like the dream warriors. Pale like moonlight on the hill of battles. Pale like something that had watched the world for a very, very long time. He approached with silent grace, the kind that felt practiced across generations. When he stood before us, he bowed slightly, not formal, not decorative. More like acknowledgement. Dr. Morgan, he said, voice quiet but resonant. I am Tain Hara. I bring greetings from Te Ikaika. His accent was gentle Polynesian, his consonants soft, his vowels long. But beneath it lay something older. A cadence that seemed shaped by wind across stone platforms and waves striking basalt cliffs. You've traveled far, I said. Far is only a word, he replied. What matters is arrival. Evelyn stepped forward. We're honored to host you. He inclined his head. But his gaze remained fixed on me. You carry the fragment, he said. My breath caught. What? The bronze, he said calmly. The one that woke in the soil. The one that hears the sky. Evelyn inhaled sharply. My hand drifted instinctively toward my coat pocket, though I did not touch the disc. How do you know that? I asked. Because we have one too, he said. The atrium seemed to tilt. A disc? I whispered. Older than your islands, he replied. Carved with the same spiral. Buried in stone beneath Orongo. Left by a people who carved our war god into the cliffs. My pulse thundered. Marana, he added quietly. You know the name now. The air pressed inward. Heavy. Expectant. Why are you here? I asked. He stepped closer. Because the sky is waking, he said. Because the gods who held the old wars are stirring. Because Neit has spoken to you. And because Marana speaks to us. My breath stilled. This is not coincidence, he continued. 3 places. 3 gods. 3 spirals. The alignment is coming. And you, Dr. Morgan. His pale eyes fixed on mine. You are standing in the shadow of ALMA. A shiver crawled down my spine. What does that mean? I whispered. It means, he said softly, that the sky is calling you. And if you do not answer. The fog outside the atrium pressed hard against the glass. A low hum rose through the floor. The ground wheel. My breath trembled. Neit. Marana. Alma. The spirals. The signal. The discs. The dream. Everything converged. Hara stepped back slightly, studying me as if waiting for the moment I would break, or awaken. Come to Rapa Nui, he said. Before the alignment completes. Behind my ribs, something responded, something ancient, something from the soil of Mead and the sky of Chile and the cliffs of the Pacific. I swallowed. When do we leave? I asked. Hara smiled faintly. The island is already waiting, he said. The fog against the atrium glass pulsed once, twice, 3 times. And the ground hummed in answer. The end of my audiobook chapters 1 to 5 of a 21-chapter storybook novel. As we reach the end of chapters 1 through 5 of War God Neit and the Bronze Relic of Rapa Nui, the mystery has only just begun. Across the ancient landscapes of Rapa Nui and the forgotten secrets hidden within the Atacama fragments, darker forces are beginning to awaken. And the truth behind the bronze relic may be far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. Thank you for listening to this exclusive audiobook preview of the first novel in the Atacama Fragments trilogy by Rita Weston. To continue the adventure and experience the complete story, the remaining chapters are available now in Kindle ebook and paperback editions through Amazon.com and Amazon UK. Your support helps bring independent stories, immersive worlds, and future audiobook productions to life. And the journey does not end here. Rita Weston is currently writing the highly anticipated final novel in the trilogy, The Lost City of Patagonia, a new science fiction and adventure epic that will uncover the final secrets of the Atacama fragments and lead readers into a breathtaking conclusion later this year. If you've enjoyed this audiobook presentation, please like this video, subscribe to her channel, and share it with fellow readers, explorers, and science fiction fans around the world. Every comment, every share, and every subscription helps this series grow and reach new listeners. Stay tuned for future audiobook previews, author updates, and upcoming releases from the world of the Atacama Fragments trilogy. Until then, keep searching the unknown, because some relics carry the power to change history forever. About the author Rita Weston. Rita Weston is a British author whose work blends adventure, historical fiction, and literary science fiction with a strong focus on memory, myth, and place. Her novels explore the hidden connections between history, mythology, and modern science, often set against richly researched landscapes across Europe and South America. She is the author of the Atacama Fragments and War God Neit and the Bronze Relic of Rapa Nui, as part of the Atacama Fragments trilogy, a series of stories that weaves ancient myth with archaeological and astronomical discovery. Rita Weston is currently working on a companion novel set in the lost city of Patagonia. She lives between London and Chile, Santiago, where she continues to write stories inspired by stars, silence, and the histories the world has tried to forget. Thank you for listening, and do not forget to like and subscribe to my channel here on YouTube.